I was a stay-at-home mum, 2 children, and I was heavily pregnant with a third child. My husband was not home at the time, so he was actually arrested outside. The raid took place late afternoon. I remember I'd just come back in from picking up my daughter from nursery. There was a knock at the door. So when I looked out the window upstairs, I noticed just a whole horde of officers approaching the house. And obviously my heart just sank. My immediate fear was they're going to break the door, the manner in which they were approaching the house. And my daughter was only 3 at the time. My daughter was asking questions, why are these men here? What do they want? And obviously they were distressed and they were crying. And I was like, look, just be patient. And I said to them, look, they need to eat. And they go, we can't have you touching anything in the property. So they didn't allow me to access any food or drink or anything at all. I literally had a bathrobe on, slippers. If you want to get changed, we need to search you before you leave. So I had to wait for a local female officer from the local police station to come and carry out complete search, as in a complete strip search, to make sure I'm not concealing anything on myself. I was then followed I asked to use the toilet, and they waited with the bathroom door open. They put you in a position where you feel like, even though you haven't done anything wrong, you're made to feel humiliated. Because obviously when a person goes to the bathroom, that's a private thing. It just felt humiliating, inhumane. They knew that I was heavily pregnant, and they said to me that I couldn't to begin with. So it's bad enough being strip searched, but then being heavily pregnant and strip searched is even worse, because you're just like, you feel even more vulnerable. My privacy was violated. My aura was exposed. I had to leave the property, and I just went to the nearest place that I knew, which was my mother's house. I did try to approach them at that property to say, look, I need my belongings. I need things for the kids. I'm, heavily pregnant. I'm due any day, basically. 3-4 days later, I went back to the property when they said that I could have access to it. And it was at that point that they had told me that, yes, we have your husband in custody. And they'd had him in custody for 3 days and not told me that they had him. The house was completely trashed. Sofa was ripped because obviously I don't know what they thought they were looking for. Everything was taken out of every cupboard possible. Everything was taken out of every wardrobe possible, and nothing was put back where it was supposed to be. So it's literally completely trashed. I only realized when I tried to put the heating on that there was water coming out of the central heating pipe, and I didn't realize why. And then I realized that they'd broken the joint of the radiator. So I had no heating in the house, no hot water. In the condition that I am, being heavily pregnant, there's no way I'm going to be able to fix all this and get everything sorted. So I just took whatever I needed for the arrival of the baby, obviously, just, essentials for the baby. And we cleaned whatever mess we could and just left the property as it is. And I went to stay with a relative for a period of 6 weeks, and during which time my baby was born at that time. My mom was very unwell at the time. She was staying at my uncle's house. She was the one who experienced the raid there. I was afraid to tell my mom that, Mom, this is what's happened here due to her health. Little did I know, a day or two later, they had done an armed raid on the house. They had arrested him in public somewhere. His family was in complete shock because they have a child who was disabled, who needed access to his disabled toilet facilities that had in the house. That's a very small town that they live in. So everyone was just afraid to even be near them or around them, that no one wanted to offer them help. My uncle, he didn't have any link with my husband at all. They barely knew each other. And he was kept in custody, I think it was for 7 days. He was mistreated in custody as well. He just kept saying, I need a doctor and I need my solicitor. And his requests were denied while he was in custody as well, because he suffers from epilepsy as well. Labour within itself, as for a woman, is a difficult experience, but to have to go through that alone, not feeling safe as well. I didn't want to speak to, the midwife or tell them what had happened. It was a case of, I just need to make sure that this baby arrived safely. During the time that I was actually in hospital, and he had gotten ill, he was a toddler at the time, they wouldn't basically allow him to take him from medical treatment until they'd confirmed his details. So not only was I stressed about his health and well-being, because that's my child, obviously, I was then thinking I need to make sure that I safely deliver this baby as well. And it was extremely difficult because I was in that room alone with zero family support. In a time where you're used to having your partner, you're there with you during what's meant to be a happy occasion, only a woman who's been in that situation can actually comprehend what that feels like. My daughter the most. She was what you would call daddy's girl. She was so used to having him there, and she would always question, where is he? Where's he gone? Even the day of the arrest, why hasn't Abu come home? What do you tell a 3-year-old as to where their father's gone? So I had to say to her, Abu's gone to work. He's gone a bit far away to work, but you'll get to see him soon. So she didn't take it very far. And then So I remember taking her to school for the first time. So she walked in there and she come back around and she goes, I want Abu. And I was like, well, I can't make him just appear from nowhere. He's not here. And she got emotional. She started crying. And I was like, look, you just have to be a big girl. You're going to his first day of school. It's okay. You're just nervous. But I knew what she felt because I knew she wanted a dad. And then I felt guilty because I couldn't provide that for her. Where am I going to get the money from to pay for everything? Because he was the one who dealt with all the finances and, was responsible for it. And it's difficult essentially being a single parent, 3 children under 5, and trying to get around. At the time, I was not driving either. So it's extremely difficult to try and manage all of that and then trying to manage home life without a husband there anymore. It was just extremely stressful because obviously I've literally just had a baby. My focus should be on recovering and raising my child, but instead of have all this paperwork to deal with to make sure that I'm covered, that I can stay in the property, that I'm now responsible for the bills and the outgoings. I need to make sure everything's on my name. To manage dealing with home life and manage being responsible for physically bringing in the groceries, I was able to go straight back into work, then trying to study and raise the kids at the same time. So trying to meet their needs and my own needs as well. And then my husband's needs as well while he was in prison, trying to financially support him too during that time. So it was just really overwhelming. You then have to be mom and dad and, for your husband. And it's just a lot to take on in a short period of time. A lot of family just disassociated from me, were too scared to speak to me. They'd heard of what had happened. Even though I'd had a baby at a time where you'd think people would come and visit and congratulations for your baby, nobody came. So it was a case of I felt so isolated. People were afraid to come to my auntie's house to come and see me. And during that time, it was, obviously after Ramadan, it was Eid as well. And they were just afraid to be even in the same room as me or speak to me. So I literally just took myself upstairs and avoided being around anyone because I thought, they look afraid of me. And I'm thinking, I haven't done anything. It's not me who's been arrested. But I was made to feel like I was the guilty one. There's only so much a person can take. So for me, the biggest thing was the fact that he was in prison. I tried to make contact with his family to inform them about what had happened, and they did not take it very well at all, to the point where they offered me zero support. They made matters worse. There were things like death threats. Am I safe in my home? And I started feeling paranoid, very afraid of keeping my family safe and keeping my kids safe at the time. My daughter became very reserved. She just completely shut down. She did not want to speak to anyone. She realized that dad's not here, he's not coming back. It's affected their ability to make friends. It's affected their ability to communicate what they're feeling because they were too afraid. I can't say that my dad's in prison. How are my friends going to react, or how are people going to judge me for that? I've had to deal with it as well, trying to go back into a work environment that I can't openly declare that, this is where my husband is. What did affect my daughter more is actually seeing him on the news. As they get older, then they try and look for themselves and they want to see, what has the media said about our dad? She became very afraid of police after the raid. Whenever she would see them, she said, Mom, I don't like them. Why are they here? And even if it was just a police car going past or someone in uniform, she'd kind of sort of hide behind me, and I had to teach her that it's okay. You don't have to be afraid of them. They're not here to do anything to you or to me. I don't know whether it's because of the noise that was in the house when the raid was going on. She was very sensitive to any loud noises at the time, so that it affected her the most out of my children because she was obviously aware of her surroundings during the raid. The teachers would always do that. They're very quiet and don't talk much. And it took them a long time to kind of come out their shell, a good 3-4 years, before they actually felt comfortable enough to actually, speak to their friends that this is our circumstances at home. And they felt afraid to even share it with them, fear of judgment. My son started getting interrogated by all the kids. My daughter experienced something when she was in secondary school. People started referring to her as the child of a prisoner. She experienced bullying. She started despising him and she didn't want to speak to him. And, from going from someone who was daddy's girl to not wanting to speak to her dad at all is, a complete U-turn. My children found hard to understand is, why do we have to go through the consequences as well? That why do we have to suffer as well? And very hard for them to kind of accept and overcome that this is how life is. You have to just kind of get through it. It was about a month or 2 after he'd been arrested. It was high security prison, so it took a while for clearance to be able to gain access. You have to go through a complete search, pat-down search, removal of your hijab, everything. I had to juggle 3 children and then get them through the search process. And I was worried that they might be afraid of the dogs. What bothered me the most is that when they were checking the baby, and literally taking items of clothing off and checking the nappy. And I'm thinking, why are they doing this? He's just a baby. It was so invasive. Literally strip searched by a prison guard. You're not allowed any food or liquids in. How are you meant to comfort the baby during that period? And then if I needed to change the baby or if I need to go to the toilet, I had to take all 3 children with me and then be searched again before going back in. So it took a while to kind of get used to that environment. It was extremely emotional because of the fact that I knew that that's the first time he's going to see the baby, seeing him trying to contain his emotions, because not only are you then in a room surrounded with other people and their family and, their visitors, you don't want to be seen as being weak or emotional in that environment. So it was extremely difficult to watch him go through that, and me myself trying to contain myself in front of the children. And then having to leave, my daughter saying, Abu, are you coming with us? How do you then say to your child, no, I'm not allowed, I can't come with you? And but she was like, but why? Why can't you come with us? And I just said, no, Abu needs to stay here because he's got work. She then started referring to it as Abu's house. It took her a while to understand that that's actually a prison, to come to terms with that. But it was extremely emotionally draining, mentally draining, having to watch her get upset at the end of every visit. So even if I was containing my emotions, having to see your child go through that as a mother, it's heartbreaking. You don't want them to experience something like that. The first one was nearly 2 hours distance. The visits were not the easiest because there were early morning visits at 9 o'clock. So I'd have to get the kids up at like 5 a.m., try and make sure they're up, ready, fed, accommodate for traffic. So then you go through all that 3-4 hour prep to get there, only for a 1.5 hour visit. People would be there outside the prison, I remember, almost an hour before visit time, just so that they can get in earlier to have maximum time there. And it's hard to do. When you're a person by yourself, it's different, but it's hard to do that with 3 kids, to try and make sure they're already on time, get them already on time, and having to get there, going to a new environment. The manner in which the prison guards see you or treat you is also humiliating as well. You just feel like eyes are on you and they're constantly watching everything that you do, when you're just a normal family just trying to maintain communication and contact with a relative. You're then made to feel like you should be on the other side with them as well. I wanted to make sure my children have contact with them as regular as possible. It's not always easy to do that, especially when they have their lives out here in the real world. And as much as the father wants to see them as often as possible, it's very difficult to accommodate, especially if I'm not someone who can drive that far, especially when you're traveling out of town. You don't want to travel without another adult, especially when you've got children with you. So accommodating that was always stressful, physically draining, especially depending on which prison he had been moved to. I did my best to try and make sure they were going at least once a month to twice a month. If I took another adult with me, I had to make sure that adult was from my own address to be able to actually go in the visit. Different prisons have different facilities, they have different timings. So every time they get moved, you then have to get used to what each prison's requirements are in regards to a visit. So you're constantly having to learn new things, and even trying to book a visit to begin with, that can be a stressful experience within itself. Book a visit, there's only X amount of slots available, and it doesn't matter how often you try or how early you ring them, those slots get filled up extremely quickly, and then you have then a distressed member of family on the other side saying that, no, I really want to see the kids. It's not in our hands. He was actually arrested during Ramadan, so that was the first Ramadan that we experienced without him home. I think initially I didn't feel it because of the shock of what had happened. And obviously I just had the babies. It didn't kind of hit home until following Ramadan, when I was back in my own home by myself with the children. I'm doing suhoor alone. I'm doing iftar alone. The whole of Ramadan, literally just feeling isolated within my home, just constantly thinking, I wonder if he's eaten. You just feel isolated. And Ramadan's a time where we have normally a sense of community. But I was so afraid to even actually reach out to anyone. I would just literally stick to my mother's house, and that was it, because people were too afraid to even be around me still. So not only was I afraid to try and make new friends, I couldn't even maintain the existing ones. Or people had just shut me out, or they didn't want me to see me, or if nobody reached out to ask if I was okay or if I needed anything. So it was very isolating. And that's when I realized it's going to be like this for a long time. This is what my Ramadan is going to be like. It's not even a matter of coping. It's like, if I break down, who's going to look after the kids? So you just learn to be strong, and you have to be resilient, and you have to get through it. It's constantly there in your face all the time, day after day after day. You go through that, whether it's during Ramadan or not, throughout the whole year. You're constantly the one who has to do everything. It becomes really overwhelming. I almost went into autopilot and not feeling no emotion at all. So my emotional side of things kicked in a few years after, when I actually realized that I'd been shutting out my emotions. And then I realized I've actually had a son, for the first 3-4 years of his life. I just thought of, this is a baby I have to look after. But it was only afterwards I realized that I'm actually raising these children by myself. It didn't occur to me while it was going on, because I think of the trauma of everything that had happened. My mind wasn't able to process it at the time. Initially, my husband had informed me of HHUGS prior to his arrest, with the intention of asking me to volunteer. I had forgotten that they had existed, obviously, during that time because of the shock of everything that happened. And it was actually a HHUGS volunteer who had approached me during the first few weeks of my daughter being at school. And I was still hesitant because I felt afraid to trust anyone during that period. It was early stages, but she was very accommodating, very friendly, providing that sort of sisterly support, that whenever you're ready to reach out to us or whenever you want us to help you, we're here for you. So it was gradually me building that bond with her and then learning to trust them, because that was a big thing for me, that I felt like I wasn't able to trust anyone during that period, almost accepting HUGS as a family. That's what it felt like, if I found a family that I could belong to. And then I was invited to attend a coffee morning. Actually having a safe space to be able to speak about how I felt without being judged. That was a big thing, because within the local community, all you would hear is the comments or the snide looks or the remarks when you're in public. It was a case that I was able to express how I felt, what I had been through with other sisters and families who had been through similar, and then be able to actually learn from their experiences. And that was a big thing. In normal circumstances where you don't feel like interacting with the average people who have a normal life, I call it, at least you can interact with sisters who actually understand what you've been going through, and catch up with them and see how they progress and see how they're kind of rebuilding their lives, and try and inspire each other to regain our control of our life back, because you feel like that control is snatched from you when you experience the initial stages. But me coming through this 10 years later now, I feel more in control of my life, being able to kind of be independent. And that would not have happened had I not had HUGS supporting me those early stages, helping me get back on my feet. From the early stages, obviously, financial support, shopping vouchers, clothing vouchers for the kids, their uniform, like madrasa fees and things like that, because that even though their father wasn't there, I still wanted to be able to provide those things. Even though I've been working, if I've had a shortfall anywhere or I've been struggling financially, especially during COVID, I wasn't working during COVID period, they helped me a lot during that period. During winter time, so, when the bills have gone up, providing electric heaters, blankets, things like that. And it's these little things that matter the most. Because I work term time only, I don't have income during holiday periods. Normally, I would have to borrow money from family or friends, kind of cover uniform costs and things like that. So the Back to School campaign helps us immensely, because it means that I can get my kids whatever they need without having to borrow money off people. Because I was able to equip my kids with everything that they were in need of, regards to their uniform, their PE kits. And as kids get older, the cost of everything goes up. And it's just a relief knowing that there's someone there to lift that burden. When you're a single parent in that situation, trying to financially provide for the kids, having that support is like having a backbone there, knowing that if I'm struggling, I know that HUGS is there to have my back and support me to get back on my feet. And even with driving, as the cost of everything goes up, you can imagine trying to juggle the bills, trying to juggle, food expenditure, clothes, and then on top of that, you're trying to juggle driving as well. Alhamdulillah is something that they provide support with. One of the courses that I was doing was online. I didn't have access to a laptop. They purchased a laptop on my behalf so I could actually do my coursework and keep up to date with that. They actually helped me in regards to my business as well, because I don't have the funds to get certain things. And she said that if you tell us what you are in need of, we can help you with a small amount of funds to kind of start that. And it helped a lot, because I didn't have the funds up front to buy stock for certain things. Alhamdulillah, that helped my business kind of set up. So alhamdulillah, I run my business alongside my main job that I do. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if HUGS hadn't provided that support. That still would have been on the back burner. And that's enabling me to be a bit more financially independent, being able to provide for my kids, because they want us to be independent and be able to get our lives back on track, regain that confidence and regain that stability in our life, and just be there as like the stepping stone to kind of push us in that direction. And I feel like they've excelled in that job, in trying to help me be independent. Alhamdulillah, that's what they have done. Just feel more confident with myself that I've got a skill that people actually appreciate and are willing to pay for. I felt empowered that I've got the strength and confidence now to actually build my business, interact with people, because they had faith in me. I then started believing in myself that I am capable, I can do this. And now I do it without a second thought. Always in the back of my mind, I think I wouldn't be here in this position if HUGS hadn't given me that push. They've offered like counselling sessions, things like that. And I think it's very important, especially in the current climate where these facilities are not always available through NHS because of the backlog. They did offer one-to-one support for my daughter, that if she wanted to speak to a key worker. And that helped a lot, because it was a case of she knew that she had someone she could speak to if she wanted to, even if it wasn't a professional counsellor. She knew she had a little outlet. The gifts, they came as a surprise in a time where during Ramadan, when I used to feel isolated, excited. My kids used to look forward to HUGS is going to send something. So they knew they need to expect it. They would be excited because they knew that this box is coming. I'd say to them, it's from HUGS. And there'd be times that I'd let them open it because they were excited to see things that HUGS has sent. And there'd always be like, resources in there for the kids during Ramadan, things to decorate the house, or just to make it a little bit easier for them, just to give them that homely environment, just to give them that little bit of kind of light or happiness in their home environment, which had been taken away. So it's a blessing to receive it, being known that you're being remembered, even if though your local community doesn't remember you, or your family doesn't remember you, or your friends don't remember you. HUGS never forgets us. It feels like a family. HUGS has been my backbone over the past 10 years. May Allah reward them for their work. They do it for the sake of pleasing Allah. HUGS provides a support network for families who are often forgotten about, shunned, outcast from the local community. But our community needs to remember that they are not the criminals. They are families, they are mothers, they are daughters, they are sons, they are fathers. They have had a loss, a big impact in their life. And it's our responsibility as a community to support each other. And a lot of people say, we didn't know how bad it was until it happened to us. And you will never know when that knock comes or that raid is going to happen. You don't know the impact that it leaves behind on the immediate family, on the children. That's something that stays with them for life. It's not something that they can overcome by themselves. So we need to be that support to actually help them to reintegrate back into the community, to feel welcome again. Just think, if it was one of your family members in that situation, you would want there to be someone there to support them if you physically weren't able to do so yourself. So put yourself in their shoes and understand that it's an obligation of Muslims. When a believer feels pain, and another believer should feel it as well. And Allah says that if we help others, He will help us. There could be times that we are in need, and you don't know where your good deeds are going to benefit you as well.